Until we are able to determine and understand this problem and the dangerous threat it poses, our country cannot be the victim of horrendous attacks by people that believe only in jihad. These are people who only believe in jihad. They don't want our system. They don't want our system. And have no sense of reason or respect for human life. They have no respect for human life.
You hear the crowd yesterday. Donald Trump not backing down from his proposal to ban Muslims from entering the United States temporarily, even amid heavy criticism from Republicans and Democrats alike. Reacting now, Senator Rand Paul, Republican presidential candidate. Senator, how do you see Donald Trump's comments?
Well, you know, I don't think we need a religious test, but I do think we need a pause on immigration from the Middle East. I've introduced legislation that's not based on religion, but is based on evidence of terrorist activities, evidence of terrorism training, and evidence that we are at some risk from immigration. So I would put a pause on all immigration from about 34 countries. Some of these countries are non-Islamic. North Korea, Nigeria has a mixture of Christian and Islam, but they all have a high risk for terrorism, and I think we should press pause. Why? Because we have a completely failed immigration system. We have 11 million people who are here illegally, and 40% of them came legally but have overstayed their visa. So we need to know who's here and whether they're going to attack us or not. Most of the evidence of terrorism so far in our country has had something to do with immigration. The 19 hijackers came here through our legal immigration system. Some were student visas, some were visitors. The Boston hijacker, the Boston bombers came here also as asylum seekers. In my town, Bowling Green, Kentucky, we had 2 Iraqi refugees come here. So absolutely, we need to push pause. We need to have a moratorium until we know whether or not we can actually look at our immigration system and make sure that we're not letting people come here to attack us.
We spoke a few weeks ago about your idea here, which is modeled loosely on what we saw from the Department of Homeland Security after 9/11, when certain countries were put on a list. If you came from that country, you were closely watched and hopefully under some surveillance. I know that's a weighted word, but that is what was done by the Department of Homeland Security for about 10 years, until people thought, critics of the plan thought, it was profiling. And that's one of the reasons, according to reports, that the program was done away with. So how is your proposal different? And if folks are criticizing Donald Trump for profiling terrorists, do you think that you're walking a thin line there?
Well, I think it's crazy if we're going to have open borders and let anybody come here. And this is a big disagreement I've had with Marco Rubio, is that he says he wants to defend the country, but he's not really willing to defend the borders. And so we do have to defend our borders, and it has to be based on a risk assessment. It's not a religious test. It's basically based on a risk assessment. We know where terrorism is coming from. We know who's promoting terrorism. We know who has a significant population who would want to kill us if they get here. But it's not just our enemies. We also need to be protected against people coming from Europe here. So I've said even the countries of Europe that are our friends, there needs to be a process. I'd have them all come here through global entry, which is a background check, kind of like a frequent flyer program. And so if we don't do this, we're crazy to spend hundreds of billions of dollars trying to defend the country from terrorism and then having an open border. So while Donald Trump is wrong on a religious test, he is right that we do need to defend ourselves, and it's a mistake to have open borders.
One of the things you just said is we know where the terrorism is coming from. And many of our viewers might think, well, we do know where a lot of the terrorism is coming from. It's coming from, many times, Muslim countries. And some of the reaction we're seeing to Donald Trump's comments are because there's a feeling, and we're getting this from our viewers, so I know I'm generalizing as well, that we're not having a direct conversation about the problem at hand, and because we're not speaking directly about it, we can't solve it. So in your mind, what do you think is the connection between the Muslim religion and the terrorism we're seeing, and how do we combat that?
Well, you know, I think if you can't name your enemy, you'll never defeat your enemy, and the enemy is radical Islam. It's an aberration, so I do believe that most people who believe in the Islamic faith are not violent, and that it is a minority. But also part of defeating this has to be that mainstream civilized Islam does need to rise up and admit that this is an aberration, and they need to say strenuously over and over again that their religion is a peaceful one, because we need to hear louder voices from the Islamic community. But we also need to acknowledge that we do have a risk of terrorists coming to this country, and the risk is from those who are radicalized and those who are Islamic. But I don't think we should have a blanket religious test. What we should have is a test that says we have to have more scrutiny on people coming from countries that have a significant terrorist element among them.
Dr. Rand Paul, great to have you on the program. Senator running for
Thank you.
president. We look forward to having you back again. Thank you.